One thing we're seeing more and more throughout the country is different options for affordable housing are starting to disappear more and more. And I've talked about this a few times on the channel, but really the last bastion of the most affordable housing throughout the entire US is mobile home living, okay? Because you can buy your own mobile home and just rent the land or even own the land and live very cheaply, much cheaper than people living in apartments or houses or condos, anything like that. And a lot of people need these places to live. That's the reality. If they didn't have that, they would probably be homeless. However, more and more of them are either raising rents on people to the point where they can't afford it, or they are just shutting down and kicking everybody out so they can redevelop and repurpose the land. And one of my viewers, DJ, he sent me this story from right here in Sweetwater, Florida. They are going to be closing down a mobile home park, and there's about 900 mobile homes in this community, and about 3,000 people live there. They all just got the notice that they have to get out, and they're closing by May of 2025. So this is the typical mobile home situation where people do own these mobile homes, but they're renting the land that the mobile home sits on, which is always a huge problem, guys. And I tell everybody, the best advice if you want to live in a mobile home is you need to own the land that it stands on, because if you don't, then this can happen to you at any moment in time. And no matter how well you got your life situation figured out, if the rent gets jacked up substantially or you get an eviction notice like this, then you're faced with two options. You either need to move that mobile home to a new park, which usually people can't do because it's too expensive to do, it's not easy, or just abandon the property and try to find a new place to live. Neither one of those prospects is going to be good for most people. So the landowner of this park is called CREI Holdings, and they're going to give people $14,000 to residents who leave by January 31st. So they're kind of like giving a little bonus and a little help for people to get out early. I mean, that's a nice thing to do and all, because I'm sure a lot of places don't even do that. But if they really wanted to help, they should just offer to pay their relocation expenses entirely, because people need to move a lot of these homes and they should be paying for that. You know, if they're going to give people money to get out as an incentive, why not pay the relocation expense to actually physically move their mobile home? And then, of course, the incentive dwindles the longer you drag it out. If you leave by March 31st, you receive $7,000, and if you leave by April 30th, you'll get $3,000. But the problem is all of the tenants there who are living in this mobile home park say that this just isn't enough money. They talked to this one family there, which is the perfect example of why you should always own the land when you are going to live in a mobile home park, okay? Because these people have lived there for over 30 years and they own the mobile home, okay? That's where you want to get in life. Everybody wants to have their home paid off, but it doesn't really matter if you're renting the land underneath it. And you could argue that all these houses, guys, even if you own these houses outright, that the local government owns the land that these houses sit on. Because if you don't pay the property taxes, which is essentially rent for your own land, then you will also be evicted. But at least they're not going to come in and say, well, we're selling your land and you just have to get out. That doesn't happen. But that's exactly what's happening to these people, because now they're just being told, hey, you don't have a place to live anymore. And stories like this honestly make me do question awareness around this issue, because these people were saying, listen, you know, imagine you own a home and then someone tells you you don't. Well, technically you do own the home, but you don't own the land. Whether or not they knew this 30 years ago when they bought the mobile home and moved into this park, I have no idea. Obviously, the internet wasn't really around back then, and information didn't spread as easily as it does today, which is why I make these videos, to help people understand these things. But at some point over the last 30 years, they probably should have found out that, yeah, you do own your actual mobile home, but you don't own the land, and so you could be subject to an eviction like this. Now, I didn't even know this, but apparently Florida law does require that the owners of these mobile home parks do in fact give some sort of move-out incentive. So according to the law, they need to give $3,000 for a single wide and $6,000 for a double wide, but people are getting offered over $14,000 if they move out by January 31st. So the offer is more than what the state even requires. But I think the company that owns the park came up with the math by looking at relocation costs for a mobile home, because they say full service mobile home move about 60 miles, which includes disconnect, reconnect, and transport, will cost $3,000 to $5,000 for a single wide, $4,000 to $10,000 for a double wide, and $10,000 to $14,000 for a triple wide. People are upset about this, but the reality is the developer is offering enough money, according to these statistics, to actually move the home. This one guy said he just paid $160,000 for his mobile home just 4 months ago, and now he's saying this is going to be a complete lost investment because it's going to cost $10,000 to move it. But I guess there's more to it than that, because a lot of these owners of the mobile homes, and I don't know much about this, guys, so I can't speak on this with authority, but a lot of people are saying that their mobile homes are cemented into the ground, which makes the relocation either impossible or prohibitively costly, which is going to cost a lot more than the 14 grand. The figures that were quoted of what it would generally cost to move these places are based on if it's not connected to the ground. Another man in there says that his mobile home is remodeled and it's worth $180,000, and they only want to give him, $3 grand to leave. But it's like, okay, this is where people go wrong with real estate, all right? Just this mentality, oh, my mobile home is remodeled and it's worth $180,000. Well, it's not worth anything anymore if it's not going to be moved and the land that it's sitting on isn't going to be available for use anymore. That's the thing that people miss with stuff like this. Even with the condo crisis, guys, it's the same thing, right? Like, all of a sudden, you have a lot of people in the building that can't afford the maintenance or the upkeep or the major special assessments that are coming, and, half the people can't afford to pay. Well, what does that do to the value of the units there? They plummet. It doesn't go to zero like these mobile homes, but it's worth significantly less overnight. Same thing if you own a house and you're in a neighborhood that has a lot of crime, or all of a sudden a lot of foreclosures come up, and that materially affects the value of your home. Even just having a home with a lot of deferred maintenance can make a difference in how much your home is worth or not. Here's what the Sweetwater mayor has to say about all this. He says, "I have deep concerns over this eviction and informing people they need to vacate their homes within 6 months. My administration and the city commissioners are diligently exploring every available resource while we continue to stand by our community to help these troubling times and transitions." Yeah, let's see if the mayor of Sweetwater actually does anything about this. Of course, they like to say things like this so they can look good and potentially get reelected in the future. But chances are, what are they really going to do about it? Because this is a private piece of land and the owner is saying, we want it back. And they're even giving people generous relocation incentives, according to them. So they're not breaking any laws. So how is the mayor going to interfere with the owner's right to convert and sell this property or convert it into something else? They won't be able to. And it's not like this is just happening at mobile home parks. You guys can even see in this neighborhood I'm walking through here, most of these houses used to be small little average size homes, and now they're all being torn down and built into mega mansions over here in Bay Harbor Islands. So this is just the way things are moving. People are being pushed out of the most desirable areas, and the new money is moving in. You also have a lot of people right now that are finding it tougher and tougher to actually get their refinance application to go through. The refinance application rejections are actually rising nationwide right now. According to the New York Federal Reserve, in 2023, about 15% of mortgage refinance applications were rejected nationwide, and so far this year, it shot up to 25.6%. A 10% increase in just 1 year. And here's what a mortgage broker has to say about this and why this makes total sense this is happening. Wait for it. He goes that the reason this is happening is inflation is eating away at people's savings. So what ends up happening is they end up racking up debt. So they end up depleting their savings and racking up credit card debt and other kinds of debt. So that brings down what they can afford and what they can qualify for. This is what I've been telling people on the channel for the longest time, is if you want to have any shot at being able to buy a house or refinance a house in this case, or get anything that requires credit, you need to stay out of debt. You need to pay your debts off on time, because the more debt that you owe, the less you'll be approved to borrow in the future. And here's the problem. When people go to refinance their house, oftentimes what they're looking to do, especially in today's world, is they want to refinance the home for a larger amount. So they want to borrow more money against the house so they can do like a cash out refinance and take some of that equity off the table. But in order to qualify for that, you got to have a solid income. You got to have a low debt to income ratio. The less amount of debt you have, the better chances you're going to have of being approved for something like this. But if you're already living beyond your means and racking up credit card debt and personal loan debt, then you try to go after the house, might not work. So you're hearing this now from somebody other than me, guys. This is a mortgage broker saying that people aren't qualifying for these refinances because they're taking on too much debt and they're living beyond their means. Or maybe they're not even living beyond their means. It's just that the cost of life has gone up so much over the past 4 years that they have no choice but to borrow in order to keep paying the bills. You also have other people who are buried in debt. They make late payments, which results in their credit scores dropping. And once you start making late payments, guys, your credit score just starts going through the floor. And that's going to eliminate any chances you may have had at being able to qualify for a big refinance like this. See, look, this is what houses here used to look like this right here. And now the new ones look like that. Look at the contrast from this to that. That's the whole neighborhood, guys. This is everything. You can see some of them still exist, especially on this street. But some of these other streets, nothing but huge mansions going up. So it's not just mobile home parks, it's happening everywhere. Over in Seattle, whenever we had our elections going on, they actually approved a new transportation levy called Proposition 1. And what this is a property tax measure to invest $1.55 billion in the city's transportation infrastructure over the next 8 years. But now everybody in Seattle is going to be on the hook for paying this massive $1.55 billion bill. They say this money is going to go towards things like bridge upgrades, road repairs, new sidewalks, transit enhancements, and expanded bikeways. And so how they're going to raise this money is they are going to be raising property taxes over an 8-year period, which is costing approximately $530 annually for the owner of a median assessed home at $804,000 in Seattle. Now, while that doesn't sound like too bad of a deal, you know, only an extra $530 a year, I guarantee you it's going to be more, because it always is. They always tell you it's going to be one number and it ends up being actually more in the end. And of course, that's just for the median price home. If you have a home that's gone up in value significantly to going up much higher than that over the past few years, then you're going to be paying a lot more as well. This is costing homeowners over there $65 per $100,000 in assessed property value. And this is a $250 annual increase over the previous levy. So they already had one of these property tax increases in place before this. And here's another one that's going to start as soon as this one expires. So it's estimated that Seattle homeowners will end up paying an average of more than $2,300 towards city services. So Seattle's telling people it's only going to cost the average homeowner an extra $530 a year, but in reality it's going to be more like an extra $2,300 a year. But here's the problem, guys. Everybody who's like in favor of measures like this where they raise the taxes in order to fix this or that, this is what ends up happening. Because people who are against this are saying, listen, this is going to significantly raise taxes with little input from residents on how the funds should be spent. That's the key phrase right there, how the funds should be spent. We're paying all these taxes, but you don't get to choose how they spend the money. That's exactly how our federal government operates. Nobody said we want them to give a bunch of money to Ukraine. Nobody said give away millions and billions to illegal immigrants pouring into the country. Nobody voted for any of that stuff, and the government gets to do that at their own free will. And the other problem with things like this, of course, is the burden falls on the homeowner, right? But everybody who lives in the city of Seattle is going to benefit from these programs whenever they actually make these improvements, if they actually do what they say they're going to do, right? So renters and people that are living for free are going to benefit from all of these things, but only the property owners have to pay for it. Now that's not really fair, is it? I mean, if it's just a transportation issue and they need to fix up all the roads and make improvements to all that stuff, wouldn't it just make sense to collect a toll for people who drive on the road? So the more you drive, then the more you're going to pay the toll. It seems like it's only fair that people who are actually using the roadways the most should have to pay for it. That makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I get it that property owners, they get to deduct some of their mortgage interest, and that's a tax deduction for property owners, but it doesn't really matter when you're constantly getting hit with all these increases from different angles. You know, you get a property tax increase here, you get an insurance increase there, you get another problem that comes up you have to pay for. It's just never ending as a homeowner. So yeah, you could say, well, you know, it's an unfair advantage that property owners get when they get that mortgage interest deduction for the IRS. But at the same time, it's also a lot more expensive to be a homeowner, guys. I just put this out there in a video last week that it is now on average 35% more expensive to be a homeowner anywhere in the country. That's just the average. Of course, it could be less, but usually it's more. So homeowners already have to pay a premium to keep a roof over their head, and then they get slapped with stuff like this. And the funny thing is, they actually did vote for it. Now, there's one other thing I wanted to mention here that people need to be aware of when they're buying a house, and it's something that doesn't really get talked about often. One of my viewers, John, he wrote me an email because he actually lives up in Palm Coast, Florida, which is one of my areas of Florida that I like. He says they have a problem when it comes to Flagler County Airport. And what it is the residents are complaining to the city and the county and the state, and nobody seems to care, and their complaints are basically going unheard. And the complaints are about all of the flight paths and the noise that are caused from the airplanes that are flying overhead constantly. He says he's 70 years old and he's never experienced anything like this. And he wanted me to just mention this problem here on YouTube so people understand that this is yet another thing that you have to look for when you're buying a house. And it's not something that first comes to your mind is what's the flight path like, how many planes are flying overhead regularly. And it's not something that's disclosed to you by the current homeowner. Your real estate agent isn't going to tell you about it. And apparently your local governments definitely ain't going to tell you about it. So you're pretty much on your own trying to figure this stuff out. Now, I also understand that some people are more bothered by stuff like this than others, and depending on when you're home and how often the planes are flying overhead, it may be a much bigger issue for somebody like John, who's probably retired, than somebody who isn't at home and works all day. And I wish I had better advice for you on how to figure out if this is actually a problem where you're looking to buy. But unfortunately, since no one's really going to tell you this information, you're kind of stuck with relying on what the neighbors tell you. So if you're really concerned about this and you know this is something that's going to bother you, then I suggest talking to your surrounding neighbors and asking what it's like, and also visiting the property several times to see if you notice this yourself. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you are subscribed to the channel, and if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.